Wonderful. We are live. Sorry for the slight delay to everyone here waiting. Like always, there's always some little Google ghost in the system, and so you may we'll just see if our twins. We kept having twins of us popping in and out. So we think we've got it all set, and we are excited to get going this morning with iSpring's Leadership Series Google Hangout. Thank you everyone for joining us, and those of you who are watching live. We do have the Q&A open, so on our Google Plus page you can ask questions right there. If you click on the Google, there we go. It is on, Bobby. Shout out to you. You're already chatting with us, so it is working. And we have with us today a very special guest. And Jane, you're coming all the way from, I guess each of us say over the pond, from across the pond. But we have with us Jane Hart. And Jane is an independent, and Jane just disappeared. She went into the pond. Jane, you're supposed to be over the pond. But Jane is an independent workplace learning advisor, and she's an international speaker, a writer. Most people in the learning environment know her. Soon you'll be able to see her on the Google Hangouts. There she is. Jane, I'm really good at tap dancing. I'm going to keep tap dancing when the Google Ghost pulls you back up. This could be a lot of fun. But yeah. Jane, first, just introduce yourself to us. Tell us about you and your business.
Oh my goodness, okay. Well, I hope you can hear me now. Thanks for that. Sorry for all these problems, but it's fun, isn't it? We have to just go with the flow.
Let's call it entertainment. That's right.
Okay, well, I'm Jane Hart, obviously, and I live in the UK. I live near Bath, which is in southwest England, and pretty much a virtual worker. And I think people probably know me best from all my online stuff, where I'm the founder of the Center for Learning and Performance Technologies, which is a place where I share everything I find out about what's going on in learning development and tools and technologies and trends. But, I also help businesses on an advisory basis, a consultancy basis. I do a lot of speaking worldwide, where we meet up from time to time, Gina, don't we? And I write books and I run workshops. So I do quite a lot of stuff, really.
You're a busy woman. Well, Taylor, I'll let you jump in because I know you found a great article.
Yeah, Jane, you recently wrote a post about going from knowledge worker to learning a business environment, how that can help your organization. So we should just start off, and if you could define the difference between the two learners.
Okay, well, I mean, I think that the term knowledge worker was coined by Peter Drucker back in about 1959, and he used it as a term to kind of describe workers who were involved in sort of non-routine problems. And I think that term stuck around for a long time now. It's also meant, I think, that organizations have tended to think very much about this knowledge thing, and we talk about knowledge transfer and pouring knowledge into people's heads. And in the past, I think that really was quite important because people needed to be trained to do their jobs, and generally their early training lasted them throughout the whole of their careers. But of course, as jobs have got more complex over time, people needed to be trained more often on new processes, on new technologies, and so forth. And so training really became a very full-time operation just to keep up with people's knowledge and needs, and to skill them in new things. But the world has actually changed an awful lot now, certainly since 1959, and we're living in this era of exponential information growth. And every minute, huge amounts of information is being produced. But the interesting thing is that even though information is being produced, the half-life, as they would call it, of a piece of knowledge is actually only around about 5 years. In other words, after about 5 years, it's out of date. And it's actually gone for people to say something like, a college degree is actually going to be out of date before the loan is paid off. I mean, it's an astounding piece of information. But this really means for everyone, not just college students, for everyone, we're going to continuously need to refresh what we know and continuously learn. And the training departments really can't keep up with all this. There's so much that everybody needs to do their job that they just can't possibly provide everybody with everything they need. So it's going to be up to individuals to continue to learn new things for themselves. And that's really the concept of the learning worker, which was coined actually by Jacob Morgan, and he's the author of a book called The Future of Work. But it's really all about individuals continuously learning for themselves, staying abreast of new developments in their field of work, not just through studying stuff, not through just self-study or training, but, you know, in professional networks and other social channels. And of course, organizations need fresh thinking and fresh ideas to ensure they grow. So it's important that the things that people find for themselves, you know, they bring back into their organizations. So this learning worker is this individual who continuously learns and refreshes his knowledge throughout his career, his or her career.
Yeah, and it's interesting, Jane, because, you know, it's one of those things that I have a team of people that on our team here at Social Connects, and I'm always looking at how do you encourage people or help people learn to learn, because I think we're taught when we leave school we're done learning and we get into our job and we'll pick up some things, but we don't really seek out, or I don't want to say take the initiative, but it is a matter of we have to take initiative to want to continue learning. Have you been able to identify or pick some skills? How do you teach someone to learn to learn?
Yeah, it's a good point. And I think the trouble is, learn to learn just traditionally mean learn to study, isn't it? Learn informal courses, learning how to sort of sit down and do your night homework and all the rest of it. And I think that's the part of it. You know, we still need going to study stuff. But I think nowadays learning to learn means a whole lot more than that. And I think it means building this habit of continuous learning and keeping your eyes and your ears open to constantly what's going on around you and what you can get from it. And in particular, in the work situation, extracting what you've learned from your daily experiences with your colleagues, you know, on your individual tasks. You know, and in fact, as everyone says, this is how we mostly learn at work, by doing our jobs. But we often don't take time to kind of think about what we've been doing and what we've actually learned from it and what we can take away with it and what we can apply to new situations. And it's also about, as I said earlier, keeping up to date what's happening in, you know, your industry and field. And traditionally, people go to conferences, don't they, once a year, or they read a few magazines. But really, that's not enough nowadays. That really is only going to show you what's happening now. What you need to be aware of is what's happening next, what's going to be what's on the horizon, what you need to be thinking about for the future. And really, for me, that's what the social web, you know, has a lot to offer, because it's there in your social networks and connecting with people all around the world, thought leaders, experts, whatever you want to call them. You're hearing about what's happening next, so you're always in tune for where you need to go. And it's also about, for me, you know, recognizing that we learn serendipitously, accidentally, in a very unplanned way from doing other things. Suddenly we have learned something. We may not be conscious of it at the time, but I think we need to keep our eyes open, our ears open, you know, to what's happening on a daily basis and what we're perhaps learning unconsciously. So for me, that's what learn to learn is all about. It's not just, I say, studying. It's being aware of what learning means in the grand sense of things.
Yeah, almost when you hear within your industry and just daily, you'll hear people talking about a certain skill they have or something they're doing, and you're right. I think it's just taking, again, back to initiative. It's taking the initiative instead of saying, oh, that person knows that, or I wish I knew that, to I need to learn that. I need to just take it upon myself, and no one, and that's nothing. Maybe no one at my organization is going to pay me to learn that, but for me to continue growing in my career, I have to take the initiative to want to learn that. And I think that's a huge shift for a lot of people who sit back and wait to be spoon-fed. If I know it, someone's going to make me go to a training class. Instead, No, I need to be putting myself out there so I can stay on top of my industry.
Absolutely, and I think the thing is for organizations who are trying to help individuals do this is to realize they're not doing it for the organization's sake necessarily, but they're doing it actually for the individual's sake, because as you say, to stay on top of their game, to stay employable even.
Right.
And it's no longer a job for life. It's imperative that everybody thinks like that.
Yeah.
And some more facts I came across recently. It says it's likely that current students are going to have more than 10 jobs by the time they're 38. So we're constantly going to take on new work, and to get that new work, we've got to show not just that we have the current skills, but we're prepared actually to sort of build new knowledge, new skills for ourselves as we go along. I think in the future, organizations are not necessarily going to want to train people to do a job. They're going to want people who are, already part the way there to do the job for them.
Yeah. That's what I always say. I want to hire people who already know more than I do. I want people who already are ahead of me in certain skill areas, because they're more valuable to me than me having to start from scratch and train. It's like, take that initiative and get up to speed on things, and you're more valuable to an organization. Sorry to cut you off there, Taylor. I think you were about to ask her a question.
Well, I was just going to add.
Oh, go ahead, Jane.
Oh, I was just going to say, in terms of learning development, I think means something different for them as well. Because in the past it's been about, the authoritative voice, what we tell people to do, and they're a bit wary about self-organized learning, things people go out and learn for themselves. And I often hear things that sound to me a bit like the learning police. What you've learned, you're not authorized to do that because we haven't taught you it. So I think it's going to be a big mindset changes for L&D as well, to recognize that we've got to help and value people's self-organized learning and what they find out for themselves, not saying you only learn what we tell you and that's it.
Right. Yeah, good point.
Sorry, Taylor.
Yeah, and that answers it a little bit, the next question we have, but just specifically, how do organizations help foster this new kind of learning worker? We know that they should, and we know that learning workers should switch from just knowledge workers and being told what's happening, but how can organizations actually foster this as a new way of learning?
I think they're going to need to recognize that, first of all, that workplace learning is more than training. The traditional view of workplace learning is equals training. And it's important, of course. We're going to have to still train people to do things, but it's not everything. And so they're going to need to recognize that learning happens in all these different ways and value them all as well. And then, I get the impression, as I said, that anything that somebody's learned for themselves or found themselves is valued less than some things that people are trained to do. And I think also the other thing is that they don't need to try and manage and track it all. I get the impression everyone tries to sort of like get everything in everybody's brain and put it into their learning management system. I mean, that's really not the future as I see it. I think the most important thing is, how this is improving their job and their team and overall business performance. That's really the things we need to be worrying about. So, for organizations, they're going to have to do things differently. They're going to have to shift their own thinking about what it's all about. And learning and development departments are going to have to sort of change their view on what services they provide as well. They're not just about modernizing training, making it a little bit more, informal or whatever, but, support individual needs, helping people develop those new skills, become independent learners, and then support managers and teams to share all those experiences as well. So it's going to be quite a big shift. I think, as I said, we're still going to need to train people, but the focus, I think, is going to be moving away from that sort of knowledge transfer, dumping of content into people's brains, to developing the new skills that people can do this for themselves. And we know that there's already lots of people out there who are already doing this. We're preaching to the converted, to probably many of the people who are on this call, but there are many others who could probably help could do with some help, and I think this is where we're going to need to sort of move our efforts towards building those new skills, really, perhaps, rather than putting content into people's heads.
I think some of the people who have the hardest time with it might be in that. I mean, we say we're preaching to the choir, but I think sometimes in learning and development areas, again, we're put in there to do a specific job, and we're put in there to develop courses and programs and teach. I wonder how hard of a shift, is it? We have to get in the mindset in the learning and development. You really are becoming more of a coach, and you're coaching employees. And again, I think we've been hearing this for a long time, but I think that's still a hard shift because I wasn't hired to coach, and coaching seems like that's an external consultant versus, what do you mean coach internally? And I think that could be part of it, is internally. That's a hard thing for people to start looking at their own positions differently, and how do you justify your existence when you might not be required to develop as many courses as much as coming alongside and helping to coach some of those people who are learning independently.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely right. But this is a huge opportunity for learning development, all this, because this is really massive. We're not talking about creating little bits of courses anymore. So I think we're going to see specialisms. There are going to be people who remain instructional designers and create e-learning, and trainers who are going to do face-to-face training still, I should think, because that, for me, that's just as important. But I think we're going to see people who are going to be much more community managers and support communities, people who are personal learning advisors, you can support these new needs. So we're going to see a much broader range of opportunities and roles in the profession, which for me, I think sounds really exciting. And people can then specialize. They haven't got to do all these jobs. So if somebody wants to stay as an instructional designer, that's fine. But if somebody feels that they'd like to take on these other roles, there's great opportunities, I think, to do so.
So basically what we're really saying is, if you are in the learning field right now, you better be the first one in line to become a learning worker, because you've got to learn. I mean, I love what you just say, instructional learning advisor, or no, personal learning advisor. It's like, that's a cool title that is new, to this environment. So yeah, I think it's, the choir, all of us better make sure that we're in the front of the line to become learning workers. Yeah. Trainers can fall into just as easy into that knowledge worker, and I kind of know what I'm supposed to know to train others. Yeah. Yeah. So that's a great point. Okay, Taylor, sorry. I kind of just derailed you.
These are great points. Good to keep it flowing.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, you write about how becoming a learning worker and transforming this to be the way that your organization works. You write about how it can transform it. It can. It's something that we need to start doing. And obviously, you've been a learning worker. So how have you seen this transform your organization, your career, your
well, as I said. Yeah, as you said, for me, I've always been a learning worker, so it hasn't actually transformed my career. It's defined my career, right. And I think that's really the important thing. It's just how I work, how I do things. I'm always trying to improve what I do. I'm always on the lookout for what's next. I'm always trying out new things, and I'm learning from doing that. What worked, what perhaps didn't work so well, what I could do better. And so for me, that's what it's all about: learning from doing, learning from conversations, learning from people, learning from all kinds of ways. I have to say, I haven't been on a course for years. That's not the way I personally prefer to learn. I prefer to kind of like find out things and connect the dots for myself. That's how I learn. But and that, as I said, that's how I've always been. But then it doesn't just stop there. What I've tried to do is then share what I've done, and I think that's where people probably know me, because, as I said, I share things on my website, all the tools I find, all the things about trends. On my blog posts, I try to share things about what I'm finding out on hearing and getting a feeling for what's happening in workplace learning. And I do that in presentations too, when I'm asked to speak at conferences, and and I try to write it all up on a regular basis in books, so it's all kind of together, so it's not in lots of blog posts all over the place. So I'm now working on another book, which is going to kind of include all this stuff because I think this is really important stuff for the future. And then I run workshops where I share with the people who come together and want to talk about it, to find out a little bit more in a little bit more sort of structured way. So I guess that's how learning has defined my career. I learn and then I share what I learn.
Which I just have to say, and just kind of toot your horn for you, because I feel like, Jane, you're such a great example of someone who you've become a valuable resource in the learning community through your ability and desire to be a learning worker, to seek out learning and then to share what you've learned with others. If I mean, when you look at what do people need to do, because that's usually how I like to end, is just say, you know, what are some steps people can do if they feel like they've kind of slipped into that comfort zone of I know what I know and I'm good at it and I don't really have time to continue learning. I mean, I could say in one step, just follow what you do, and that would help move someone into that mode from a knowledge worker to a learning worker. But do you have any other kind of steps that you feel that people can take who might be feeling stuck?
Yeah, when I work with organizations, but I think it comes two ways. There's the sort of like the manager and how the manager can support this, and then, you know, then individuals, if they want to do this sort of on their own by the side. So, you know, for a manager, he says, well, how can I just get my people thinking about like this? So I just say to him, well, actually, you can start with something really, really simple. Every meeting you have or every one-to-one situation you have, ask the individuals, what have you learned today? You know, that's the question we have on Learn Chat, isn't it? What have you learned today? Now, the first time you ask it, people will go, oh, I don't know. What did I learn today? I can't think of that. They have to scratch their heads and they won't think. So then you say to them, well, spend 10 minutes at the end of each day just jotting down in a personal way what you got out of the day, what worked, what didn't happen, and you know, you've got some reflections and think about them. And actually then, when the manager says to you, what have you learned today, you've actually got some stuff to say, oh, I did this and I did that, and you know, that's really, really simple stuff. And then, of course, the next big step is, well, not just keep it to yourself, let's share it. Let's work out loud. Let's share what we're doing, and we can all learn from one another and see overlaps and duplicates and where we can solve people's problems and where we can help one another out on projects they're working on or issues they have. You know, and for me, you know, that's not the traditional view of workplace learning, but for me, that's learning, and that's really valuable learning stuff. And, you know, so for the manager, just that tiny little sort of action can begin to get people thinking about learning in a very different way on what they're getting out of everyday work. Because, you know, we just take it in and do our jobs. We don't really think about it. But if we just take a bit of time to do that reflection and then, you know, sharing, it actually begins to make us really realize what we have learned at work. So that's, you know, that's my sort of advice to sort of managers, really, to get them going.
And I think at home we could do the same thing. I mean, when my kids were young, we used to always ask, what's one thing you learned today? And then as parents, you also share what's something you learned. I think if every day we're always questioning, what did I learn today? And you know, and don't let your kids eat until they answer that question. And sooner or later, they're going to come up with something.
You know, and so I think, you know, it's really quite sort of an easy step to take. Sometimes, you know, the next step would be to say, well, let's think about doing some more planned learning, you know, because that's like what happens every day. We're planned learning, and you know, how can we help that to happen? And but you know, to formalize it a little bit, you know. And I think sometimes it's not the ideal way, but it, you know, some organizations, it makes people happier if they can formalize it a bit. So let's say, well, what we'll do is we'll give you like 30 minutes a day to do something for yourself. And set up your own individual learning plans, and you know, say what you want to do and align it with our business goals and your job goals, and so you know, it seemed to sort of like to fit together, so you don't go out and just go out and learn any old stuff, but it's actually organizationally specific, you know. And then if people just spent 20 or 30 minutes a day, that works out about 10 hours a month, 100 hours a year. That's equivalent to about 12 training days. And for me, you know, I would say the value you get from just doing those things for yourself is probably you know, really, really probably very, very powerful.
Yeah.
So how would you do that? Well, you know, obviously you need to think about how you could do some learning that aligns with goals, job goals, or business or whatever. But what you do is really up to you, and how you do it's up to you. And that's the great thing about it, because you could think about some ways you want to improve yourself, and then you could say, well, do I want to do this in a formal way? Do I want to join some course, or, you know, a MOOC or something? Because there's so many out there, as we know. Or do I want to do it in a more informal way, you know, building my personal learning network up, or reading blogs, or just getting Google Alerts send me new stuff every day.
Yeah.
And so I can have coming to me whatever I need, you know, in the way I want it and the way I prefer to do it. So as I said, I don't actually go off on courses, but I like getting all this stuff in and making sense of it myself. So we can choose. That's the great thing about it. We can plan what we want to do, and we can then decide how we want to reflect on it, because ideally it's not just about getting it all in, it's reflecting on it, you know. And then sometimes organizations like you do that a bit more sort of in a formal manner, so you might want to create a learning log or something where you evidence what you've learned, so that you can show that how you spent your 30 minutes. But you know, it's an easy way, even if it's not part of your, you know, your organizational policy to do that. It's to do that for yourself, and to demonstrate what you're learning through a learning log. It's a great piece of evidence to show to your next employer, or if you know your same employer, if you want to get some promotion, say, look what I'm doing for myself, and you know, here's the evidence for it. So that would be, you know, individually steps that I would suggest if people, you know, feel they wanted to sort of demonstrate that they're moving into becoming, you know, conscious of their own personal development.
Well, Jane, as you were even speaking, I'm coming up with a brilliant idea here. Every once in a while, it strikes. And I see Paulina on here. So, Paulina, I'm just going to throw this out here. But I think we're gonna at iSpring here, we're gonna help everyone become a learning worker. And to do that, you're going to, we'll start a campaign, and over the next 30 days, we're going to encourage people to use the hashtag Learning Worker. Taylor, be jotting these notes down because the brilliance will go away. But the hashtag Learning Worker, and we want people to start sharing things that they've learned with others. And then, Jane, not to put any pressure, but when is your new book coming out? We need this to be a prize.
Okay, yeah, well, I'm working on it as we speak, so it's going to be finalized by the end of summer, so in a few months' time.
So let me get my lighter out. I'll light a fire here under you. I think somehow we could tie this into, we're going to put together a fun incentive to have all of us start sharing what we've learned, and then have a prize, and we'll give away, even if we have to give away one of your older books, we'll give away one of your older books as an incentive to get out there and to make that shift, and to help spread this word of how to help others become learning workers instead of just knowledge workers. I think that'll be a fun incentive. So that's a great wrap up. And Jane, if people want to work with you, if they want to have you come in and help their organization, how can people get a hold of you?
Well, the easiest way is probably go to janehart.com, because from there you can get links out to everything that I do, all the websites and the top 100 tools thing, which we didn't talk about, and the presentations and the consultancy, and you know, everything there. So that's the place to go, janehart.com.
And it's H-A-R-T for those, I don't know who would know you already, but Jane, HART.com
exactly.
is where they can get a hold of you. And then on Twitter, you have a unique Twitter handle because it's a Center for Performance or Learning. I can't remember.
It's C4LPT. So it was a good idea at the time. Not so good now.
Sometimes we're too brilliant for our own good.
The website, the Twitter handle, they'll all be in the description of this video, so don't worry about jotting it down if you didn't.
Okay, good.
Awesome. We'll have it on there. Jane, thank you so much for...
Not at all.
You guys both, neither one of you disappeared once we started. Google was finally okay with us. Thank you, Jane. a treat. And be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel, iSpring. We've got a YouTube channel filled with videos that all about the product videos, and then we have our YouTube channel that you're watching probably this video on if you're watching it later, the replay, and subscribe there. Or definitely find iSpring on all social media channels for great content and links to find Jane Hart, or just, again, go to janehart.com, even easier. Thank you so much, everyone, and we'll see you next month.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
Thank you.